Hello, everybody. Nate Brown here, the Senior Director of Customer Experience at Arise, and I've got a real treat for you today. We have Esben coming at us live from Utah. Hello, Esben.
Nice to meet you. Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello. You got a great session prepared for us, and it's on a topic that I love. It's on product-led growth. So, talking about the future of the SaaS space. I feel like in SaaS, it's been crazy, all the things that are going on in terms of the rise of customer success, maximizing customer value through this, a lot of customer experience principles coming in, but embedding that UX design and experience thinking into the product from the very beginning. So I know you have some chief experience officer in your background, Esben, but I cannot
Mhm.
wait to hear what you have for us today. So take us away.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. It's a pleasure being here, and yeah, I'm very excited to be doing this talk about product-led growth here. So I'm just gonna share my screen here. Great. So I'm here to talk about a topic that's very dear to my heart, which is exactly product-led growth, as Nate mentioned, which is what I see as the future of SaaS, which is short for software as a service, for those who don't know, but basically the modern way of selling software, and more particular business software, through the internet. Before we dive into this exciting topic, I'm just going to introduce myself a bit. So my name is, as mentioned, Esben. I'm the co-founder and chief growth officer at a company called Userflow. Userflow does basically in-app onboarding. So if you have a software, you can use Userflow to build a layer on top that guides the users to use your software through product tours, checklists, etc. Prior to Userflow, I co-founded another company called Cobalt, which is in the cybersecurity space, but was also a software company. As you can maybe hear by my accent, I'm Danish, but I've been based in San Francisco for the last 9 years. And currently, as mentioned, I'm in Utah, just living here for a month. I can be connected with on both LinkedIn and Twitter, and always happy to connect for a good chat. So before I explain what product-led growth is all about, I want to explain a bit about why product-led growth has become a thing. And to do that, we need to look at how the go-to-market motion for software has changed over the years. And basically, there's a company called OpenView, a venture capital company. They defined these 3 eras, and I like this way of presenting it. So they basically said in the 80s and early 90s, we had what was called the CIO era, so Chief Information Officer era, where software was very expensive. It was on-premise, so it was not in the cloud, and you typically sold business software to a CIO, so to the IT department, and it was typically done via in-person meetings, so a person traveling around and selling the software. Then in the 2000s, Salesforce and other companies introduced this software as a service model, where software moved to the cloud. It became cheaper, and one started selling more directly to the business department. So instead of selling to the IT department, one was, for instance, selling Salesforce directly to the sales department. Sales of software also started being done increasingly over the phone or web conferences instead of being done in person. And the era we are in today, which maybe started around 10 years ago, is the end user era. And I call it the mature software as a service era. What has happened is now the end users are empowered to decide what software a company should buy. It's become very, very cheap to actually launch a software online due to AWS and GCP and so on, which means that software providers can also offer free trials and freemium services of their products. And this gives a possibility for users to actually try before they buy. The other thing that has happened is that software is increasingly bought without ever speaking with a salesperson. So you now offer possibilities to just swipe a credit card and buy the software without ever speaking with anybody. And it's in this world that product-led growth has become the big trend. To look at this further, then a 2015 Forrester report, and remember this was almost 10 years ago, it said that nearly 75% of B2B, so business-to-business software buyers, now say that buying from a website is more convenient than buying from a salesperson. And 93% say they prefer buying online than rather from a salesperson. And this trend has only increased throughout the years. So that's where product-led growth comes in. And what is product-led growth then? Well, product-led growth is basically a go-to-market strategy where you always think, how could our product solve this? So everybody from sales to marketing to customer success, basically everybody always should think product first in everything they do. So it's basically a culture around where you put your software and product first and try to make the product do the heavy lifting of your go-to-market motion. A great way to look at product-led is to compare it to its counterpart sales-led, where you involve people in every step. So you, in a sales-led process, will have salespeople, customer success people, and you will have a lot of meetings. Then in a product-led model, you try to reduce the need for these meetings and have the product do more of the heavy lifting. The reason why this product-led growth trend has become popular is, among others, that a lot of successful companies have used this model. These are just some of them. So to give an example, for instance, Zoom, the way they do product-led is that they have the free product. So they have a free version of Zoom that consumers can use, and they can then see how fantastic Zoom is as a tool. And when they have seen that, they will go and recommend to their company to actually buy Zoom for their business. So in that way, Zoom is using their product to actually show the value and sell the bigger business deals. And all of the companies listed here has a similar kind of sales go-to-market motion. OpenView, the venture capital company, they've made a comparison where they track software as a service companies on the public markets and see the ones that are product-led versus the ones that are sales-led. And what they see, it's still early numbers, but they generally see that product-led companies tend to grow faster, have higher revenue multiples, and better gross margins. So early data shows that product-led companies are outcompeting non-product-led companies, especially at a scale where you are beyond 10 million in annual recurring revenue. To dive a bit deeper into the aspects of product-led growth, I think I want to use this sales-led versus product-led analogy again. So let's look a bit closer on that. Basically, in a sales-led model, you always have humans in the funnel. So typically you would have things like you request a demo, you always need to talk to a salesperson, there's a contract, there's implementation and so on to buy software. Whereas in a product-led model, you have self-sign-up, online terms and conditions, automated onboarding, online documentation. So it's a lot more automated and product-driven. Another way to look at this is in this nice overview here of a sales process created by the product-led community. In the traditional sales-led model, you would have a user visit your website. They would sign up for a demo request. They typically then need to have a qualification meeting with a junior salesperson. They get passed to a senior salesperson. Then they have a demo. Maybe there are more demos or meetings. Then they get a contract. They negotiate back and forth, more meetings. And then when they decide to buy it, they get onboarded with a customer success meeting, and then they get to use the product. This is a very risky process because the customer has actually not used the product before they actually have bought. So it's very likely the end users might not like it. In a product-led model, you simplify this process and switch it around a bit. So you have a customer visit your website, they sign up for a free trial or freemium, they experience the value of the product, and then they might buy without ever speaking with anybody. Salespeople can then still become involved, and customer success people can still become involved, but typically at a later stage than to kind of support this process instead of be a key kind of ingredient in the product process. So to summarize, product-led growth benefits is basically about empowering the end users in this end user era. It's about growing faster at scale, as the early public data shows. It's a way to reduce customer acquisition and customer service costs because you reduce the need to have humans in the funnel. And this is my favorite, you end up building better products, because if your product needs to be the first touch, the first thing your customer sees even before they become customers, you need to have a great product, because otherwise people are not going to buy it. So in general, product-led growth leads to better products. But let's say you are a software business just starting out, or maybe you've been in the game for a long time and you are very sales-led driven, so you have sales teams and so on. How do you actually go about becoming product-led? Well, it's really a culture change. So what you need to do is, first of all, and that's the most important, that you need to change your culture to product first. And how do you actually do that? Well, you need, first of all, management buy-in. Without management buy-in, you're never gonna get a product-led culture. The management needs to believe in this model, and they need to make sure top down that this culture is getting into the company. Then when you have this management buy-in and you start the transition from sales-led to product-led, I think it's important that you don't start out too big, that you reduce your scope. Maybe you start with your smallest customer and build product-led processes for them, or you have another kind of scope reduction. But you should always think big, so you should always think in the future, we might expand to all customers and all areas. Then another great way and great thing to do is to map out your existing user journey and then map out your desired user journey. If you map out an existing user journey, you will likely have that graph I showed earlier where you have request a demo and all that steps. And then you should map out a desired user journey where you reduce those different steps and make it very product driven. Then another, and this relates a bit to reducing the scope, I think it's super important, especially because this is a big cross-functional initiative, to iterate in small iterations and learn to avoid analysis paralysis. Too many companies, when they're doing big changes like moving from sales-led to product-led, is they end up in this kind of analysis paralysis where they ask questions about anything and then they never move anywhere. So it's super important to do smaller iterations and build over time. And then, because it is cross-functional, as mentioned, you really need to have likely somebody driving the coordination for this kind of cross-functional initiative. So have some kind of coordinating function, making sure that all the teams stay aligned, because it's really an initiative that spans across all go-to-market functions, the product team, et cetera, et cetera. So to summarize, it's about if you want to change from sales-led to product-led, you need management buy-in, you need to reduce your scope but think big, you need to map your desired user journey so you have a target for where you want to go, you need to make small iterations to avoid analysis paralysis, and then you need to make sure that you drive this cross-functionally, both bottom-up and top-down. So let's now say, okay, we decided to become product-led. We are good. We're ready to move on with the process. An important aspect of product-led growth is something called the aha moment. What is the aha moment? Well, the aha moment is really, or as a dictionary here described, it's a moment of sudden insight or discovery. But in a product-led growth world, it's really the moment or moments where the user experiences the value of your software. So give some examples of that. I have 3 examples here. For Facebook, for instance, it's when the users discovered that they can see what their friends are up to. In Slack, which is a communication tool, I can easily communicate with my team and structure topics in a nice way. And with my own company, UserFlow, it is that I can easily build good-looking onboarding flows without needing developers. So these are just examples of aha moments. Typically, a platform has more than one aha moment, and you should map those out. What you then typically track as well is what's called an activation metric, basically some kind of metric that tells you that your users reached these aha moments. For Facebook, for instance, their activation metric in the past was, maybe it still is, that if a user adds 7 friends within the first 10 days of being a user, they think that that user has experienced the aha moment and is likely to stay. With Slack, it's if a team sent more than 2,000 messages. And with UserFlow, we look at it as somebody who spent more than 30 minutes building onboarding flows in our application. So these activation metrics makes it possible to track whether certain users have experienced the value and are thereby likely to stick around. But how do you actually then go about getting the user to this aha moment? First of all, I think it's important, as mentioned in the previous part of this presentation, that you give your users free access to your product. For software products, that's typically through a freemium or a free trial, where you basically allow the users to try before they buy. In that way, they can experience the value and try all the functionality and so on on their own. What you then need to do is, of course, identify what the aha moment is for you. And a great way to do that is to ask your customers just before they buy or right after they buy, why did they buy? What are the functionality or aha moments that stood out to them? That's a great way of getting qualitative feedback on what the aha moment is. You can then combine that with data you get from analytics tools. That's typically more to define your activation metric, but it's also a great way to kind of identify the aha moment. And then when you have that aha moment, you need to build onboarding that drives towards the aha. What many companies, software companies, end up doing is they tell, don't show, and you should rather show, don't tell. Many, when you sign up for a product first time, either they have nothing, which is like no guidance, or if they have guidance, it's like, here's feature X that does blah, blah, blah. Here's feature Y that does blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't really bring a lot of value to the end user. Instead, you should get the end user to do actions that have them realize that they can do things on their own. So like create X, launch Y, configure Z, and then have the guides drive them through the process of doing those actions so they realize they can do it themselves. So that's a great way to kind of build onboarding that drives towards aha. The other key thing you need to do is to remove unnecessary friction. So if you have friction in the experience that doesn't add to the value, you should remove that. What many companies, for instance, do, software companies, is they have sign up with Google that allows users to sign up with a single click instead of having to fill out a password and so on. That's one way of removing friction in an onboarding process. Another thing we do at UserFlow, where we have a software that technically requires a developer to install a piece of code in our software, but we allow non-developers to build and preview onboarding flows by using a Chrome extension before they even have to install that code. In that way, they can experience the value without having to install any code and involve developers in the process. And then, so to summarize, to get the user to these kind of aha moments, which is an essential part of a product-led growth model, you need to give access to your product, either to a freemium or free trial. You need to identify your aha moment. You need to build onboarding that's focused on getting to this aha moment, and you need to remove any unnecessary friction. So those were some key aspects to product-led growth and how you can move from sales-led to product-led growth, and an important aspect of the aha moment. And if you want to learn more, there are some great resources out there. You can go to productled.com. It's a great community to learn about product-led growth. It's created by a guy called Wes Bush, who actually wrote a book on product-led growth. OpenView Partners, which is the venture capital company I shared some slides from today, they have a lot of great content on product-led growth. Then there's a community product-led stack, actually created by us, Userflow, you can go to, and then of course userflow.com. And another last thing I want to mention before we jump to questions is just there are a lot of great PLG tools out there, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel and build everything custom. There's a lot of tools you can use to build this kind of product-led growth process for your software. So if that's your plan, go out and look at some of these players here for payments, analytics, support, etc., etc. So yeah, that's all for me. And now I'll open up for any potential questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Esben. That was a very interesting presentation. Lots of good aha moments for me in there. I definitely learned several things listening to that. A couple questions for you. So as far as like voice of customer, so you mentioned the reduction of the complexity in terms of meeting with all these various stakeholders and really using the product to drive forward in the process. What's the role of voice of customer to make sure that that product is relevant and useful to the end user?
Yeah, so I mean, you still need to listen to your customers, even though everything is automated and product driven. You still listen to your customers. And I'm also one thing now, I presented it a bit binary, right? That in sales led you have humans in the funnel, in product led you have no humans in the funnel, but it's really not. That's not the reality, right? In a product led model, you still have humans in the funnel. To be there to speak with customers when needed, right? But you don't make them a need to have, you make them a nice to have. So you should always still stay close to the customer, for instance, via support, and then listen to the customers, what they're saying, so you can change your product-led process to fit with whatever the customers are looking for. So that's everything from messaging on your public-facing website, on your trial, how you onboard, what features are relevant for the customers and all that stuff. So that's still super important.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So it feels like, I hear a lot, I kind of come from a different world, I come from the CX space, and we always hear that it's really these relationships that earn loyalty. In the SaaS-based space, we're trying to earn engagement, share of wallet, renewal retention rates, these critical things. With this product-led model, how do you ensure that there's that continuity of the relationship that ultimately lends itself to long-term loyalty?
Yeah, no, I think that's the big change in the market is it's not about the person. Of course, you can still create people-based relationships. That's all good, but it's no longer about that, right? We're in a world now where the best products win. I mean, I don't know anybody at the major tools I'm using, Slack, Zoom, Jira, whatever, right? I don't know anybody at those companies, but I love the products, right? Because they have great UX, they are fit for purpose, they solve my problem in a nice way, and that's really all that matters, right? It shouldn't be about whether their salesperson had a beer with me or whatever. It's about the product and it's about the end user experience. That's what matters today.
Okay. Well, that is a very different way of thinking. I think me and you might need to have a beer and talk through that a little more, but I definitely respect the viewpoint. So here's a more tangible question. So you mentioned those trigger points that help to measure to the aha moment. So in the case of Facebook, it was that activation parameter. In the case of Userflow, it's that time spent that represents that initial engagement. How are you measuring that ongoing engagement factor beyond that initial aha?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. That's where analytics tools comes in. So that's becoming an increasing important part of product-led growth, is to have good product analytics. And I think the other thing that's changing is product analytics used to be something the product team looked at, right? But now it's really a company-wide thing. So now the sales department, the customer success department, all of those need to be aware about those things happening in the product, so they can make smarter decisions around when to reach out. For instance, if they see somebody struggling with the product, maybe that requires a personal reach out. So that is a big change where you're suddenly increasingly using product analytics in the go-to-market teams.
Okay, no, that's good. I've heard tell of a software usability scale. Have you
Mhm.
heard of that as a metric that's taking hold in the SaaS space at all?
It's not something I'm super familiar with, but yeah, it's likely that somebody has something like that, right? Where they are measuring the usability. Yeah, I know it's not something I've had any experience with.
Okay, I was just curious how widespread that was. So I think
Yeah,
that'd be good for me to understand more because I do tangentially represent the SaaS space as well, and making sure
yeah.
that customer engagement is ongoing. That's very good. So one last thought here, and Steelix, I don't know if we have any. I don't see anything that's coming in the Q&A through Zoom, but I heard a crazy stat. I want to get your response on this, Esben. So this is from the Cloud Security Alliance report. The average
Mhm.
enterprise company has 464 custom applications running inside of it.
Mhm.
So I mean the tool sets are boosh, like so complex, and it's
Yeah,
creating a really fragmented digital experience. First of all,
yeah.
does that statistic surprise you at all? And then second, if that is the reality, how do we get back to a place where we can create a frictionless digital experience?
I think it doesn't surprise me that they have that many tools. I think they could definitely cut down on some tools, right? It's likely that certain departments are buying the same tool, solving the same problem, right? But that's always that's the end user era as well. The end users have more power, so they also have decision power to buy more stuff, right? But so I think definitely there's always room for simplification in those enterprises. I don't think necessarily that having many software to solve problems is a problem. What you can do today is you can do a lot of integrations. Integrations is an area that is increasingly becoming more and more frictionless. You have companies like Zapier that makes it easy for anyone to build integrations between software. So I think that's an area we'll start to see more and more innovation in, is how do we actually sync or integrate all these tools together to make them work flawlessly and frictionless together, so the end users can use their tool of choice while the data still is in sync across the company.
Love it. Love it. Well, Esben, you're a wise man. We sure appreciate you sharing all this wisdom with us today. And yeah, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Have a great day in Utah today. Hope you enjoy the
Thank
rest of
you.
the sessions.